Hi, my name is Rem, and in this episode we'll implement AJAX Request to backend server to fetch games collection. And for those, we'll create the backend server itself with Express and MongoDB. Also, we'll react to the result of this request by updating application store. So first, let's make AJAX Request. For that, we need to dispatch thunk action from games page component livehook. To dispatch action, we need first to have such an action, and second, pass it somehow to games page component. So we want to pass action wrapped into dispatch call to the component. So we can just call it as a regular function inside of the component did mount components livehook function. Something like this. This props fetch games. For that, we need to pass object of actions we want as second argument to connect function. So let's go down to connect function and add fetch games there as second argument. Now let's import this action from actions file. We'll store all actions in one file in this series, but in a big application, you might want to split it into separate files depending on business domains. So we import fetch games from actions file. As we introduced another prop to this component, let's add it to prop types as fetch games React prop types function is required. Now let's create actions.js file. And here, let's create thunk action. For that, we export function fetch games, and in it, we return another function that takes dispatch function as an argument. Here we want to make request and return promise. I personally love Access library, but in this series, we are going to be with the cool kids and use fetch, which is supported by most modern browsers, except I think IE and Safari. So of course, in real world, you'll use polyfill to support all browsers. So we fetch API games and it returns promise. If we go to browser right now and go to games page, we see that request is made. Cool. Now we need to create server to handle it. So we'll create our server right here in our client-side project. This is mostly mock server, but it can be improved later to be the actual server with a little work. Let's create backend folder and there's server.js file. We'll define the whole server right in this file just to keep it simple. I can go with this just because backend is not the focus of the series. Okay, so 3 simple steps. First, we import Express from Express. Second, we initialize application, constant application equals Express, so we initialize Express. And third, we run server on port 8080 with app-listen 8080, and then as a callback function, we console.log running server in localhost 8080. Also, we need to connect to MongoDB where we are going to store our data. For that, import MongoDB from MongoDB library, and let's define DB connection string to be constant DB URL, MongoDB, localhost, CRUD with Redux. This CRUD with Redux is the database name, essentially. And then we connect to database with Mongo client connect. We provide URL and callback function. And also let's move our server starting into this callback. So we connect to database and after that run the server. Almost done here. Last thing is to define route. We define get route to API games, then define route callback that takes request and response objects as usual. Inside of it, we want to query database, fetch games and return it to the client. With MongoDB, we do it like this. We get collection games, and then we find all records, and then we convert it to array. Result of this conversion is passed to callback function. As usual with Node.js, first argument is error, and second the result of the conversion, in our case, games collection. And then we just respond with JSON containing this games collection. Nice, that should do it. Now we need to make it work. Let's open a new tab in terminal and run npm init-y to create package.json file just for our server. Next, we need to install packages we used: npm install, save, express, and mongodb. As we use ES6, we need to transpile it. So let's npm install save dev nodemon to automatically restart server and file changes, Babel CLI, and Babel preset ES2015 to transpile ES6. Good, now back to editor. In backend folder, let's create a .babelrc file and configure preset. So we define presets to be ES2015. So last step, let's go to package.json file for our React application and add proxy line to it. Proxy points to HTTP localhost 8080. This way, all AJAX requests will be redirected from localhost 3000 to localhost 8080, where we host our server. Now let's open package.json file in backend folder and change npm start to nodeman exec babel node and the server file server.js. And that's it. Let's run npm start, and it seems to work. Now let's go to browser and reload the games page. In network tab, we see that we make successful requests to games, and in response we have games. That is now empty array. Excellent. Now, just for fun, let's add games to games collection in database and then render it on games page. We'll do it quick and dirty just to make sure it works and fine-tune it later. As we use pure MongoDB, we don't need to create schema or models, so we can change our mind anytime, which is a good thing while learning things. Let's open new terminal tab and run mongo command. We use CRUD with Redux database. And then we want to insert new records into the games collection, so we run dbGames insert and a simple object just with title Agricola. And that's it, we have game in database. So let's go to browser, reload the page, and now we see that we have game in response, but nothing happens on client app yet. And that's okay because we just made request and haven't done anything with it. So we need to go back to our client code. We finished with server side for now. For that we need to get server response data and dispatch another action, this time pure Redux action, that sets our application state. So let's go to action.js file. Here in our fetch games thunk action, let's process server response. The way we do it with fetch is in the first then callback, we convert response to JSON and pass it further. Optionally, we could do status check here, but for now we just return JSON. In the second then, we dispatch setGames action and pass games collection to it. Now let's define this action. Redux action is a pure function that returns object with one required field called type. So we define function setGames, it takes games collection, and then we return object with type setGames and games collection itself. This setGames constant is just a simple string, so let's define it also right here, export constant setGames to equal setGames. Now if you go to browser and reload the page or follow games link, in Redux tab we see that setGames action is dispatched and it consists of type and games field. Cool. Last step is to make reducer to react to this action and act accordingly. So back to editor, let's open our games reducer. In reducer, we just add case for setGames action and return new state. In our case, we want to rewrite games collection that we have now, empty one, so we just return games from action itself. Only thing left is to input this setGames constant from actions. And that's it. If we go to browser and we immediately see that message on the games page has been changed. And in Redux tab, in state tab, we see that now we have Agricola game in there. Nice. We'll stop here for now and we'll come back to this index page later when we finish adding new item to collection. C part of our CRUD adventure. If you found this episode useful, please support my work by liking it, subscribing to this channel, or sharing it with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions, leave a comment below or preferably on my blog and follow me on Twitter to get updates. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.